Special evening because we are fortunate to have Dr. Nerini here. As many of you know, this is Dr. Nerini's last presentation before he leaves us for Arizona. I know. And so it's very important that you're here tonight because Dr. Nerini has been doing extraordinary work looking at research around the DREAM Act 1079, and he'll be presenting that tonight. So I don't want to take up a lot of time introducing him, but I do want to say that Dr. Nerini's been here since 2000, and for the last 4 years he's been the Director of Student Outreach Services. And I don't know if you all noticed on your way into the building, Fraser Hall, but there's a great big banner that students created wishing Dr. Nerini all sorts of wonderful things as he goes into his next position in Arizona. And I just want to comment that while as a colleague of Dr. Nerini's, I have been very impressed by what he's been able to accomplish here at Western, not just with the 1079 work, but also with destination graduation. But I think the highest compliment that any person at Western can receive is the gratitude of students, because that's our job, is to serve students. So I think that it's quite an honor, and that we're very privileged tonight to have Dr. Nerini with us. And so with that, I'd like to introduce you and also let him tell you more about his research.
Good. Well, thank you. I'm going to try something different here. I saw this happen once before. Does anybody have their wallet or their ID? If you can just take that and just kind of put it someplace where you can't get to it. Or just give it to me if there's money in it. Just put it someplace so that you don't like it. So any ID, anything you have, just kind of put it aside. Not sure if this is going to work. We'll give it a try. Okay, so now we don't have any ID on us, right? Cop comes up to you. Who are you?
Are you asking?
Yes, who are you?
I'm a student.
Prove it. What are you doing here?
I have this class, and this class.
Yeah, but how do we know that you belong here? Okay, give me something. Show me something that tells me that you belong here.
You'll just trust me.
Okay, I can't trust you because I'm the cop, and that's our job. But imagine this. Okay, you have no ID, and you're stopped. You're walking home from the bar, and somebody stops you and asks you to prove who you are. Okay, you get in a car accident, and you don't have your ID. What happens? You take you to the hospital, and then what? This is something. Imagine what it's like not to have this identification. Are you still a person? Are you still here? This is what a lot of undocumented students have to go through because they have no documentation. And even the term undocumented isn't quite accurate because everybody has some sort of documentation. You have your student ID. That's a document, right? You might have a driver's license. That's a document. So what these students are here is just unauthorized. They're not authorized to be in the country for whatever reason. They could have either come over on a visitor's visa and that visitor visa lapsed, or they could have come over across the border and just forgot to go back home, or their parents could have brought them over. A lot of the students that we're working with, a lot of the undocumented students that we're working with are students who were brought over as children, as infants, and they've got through most of their education here in the U.S., and they've got through all their, this is pretty much their home. Let's see what I've got here. So tonight, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk a little bit about the undocumented population in the country, what we're looking at now for undocumented students in the U.S. We're going to go through a little bit of background of the undocumented students and how that affects education. Then we're going to go through the issues that students who are undocumented have once they come to college, once they get into higher education. Then there's the institution. We have some issues that we need to deal with. We have some, now that we have undocumented students here, there's some things that the institution, as a college, we have to face them. So we'll talk about some of those issues as well. So why is this an issue? There's about, the last count, there's between 11 and 12 million undocumented individuals in the country right now, at any given time. 11 or 12 million individuals. That increases about 500,000 each year. We get a half million new undocumented immigrants into the country each year. Here's what's at issue. 1 out of 6 of those undocumented individuals are children, are under 18. So we've got a big group of students who are coming through the ranks. Each year, Now keep in mind, each year 65,000 undocumented students will graduate high school in the country. Keep in mind, and again, the bulk of the undocumented individuals are Latino. And keep in mind, Latinos have one of the lowest graduation rates of any student in the country. You know, the legal, all the students, all the Latino students have one of the lowest graduation rates in high school, one of the highest dropout rates. So to think 65,000 of the students who do graduate are undocumented is a pretty phenomenal number. They predict, this is the Pew Hispanic Foundation predicts that by 2015, undocumented students are going to make up 30% of all the student population. So the numbers are increasing. So we need to address some of the issues that they have. And what's happened, there's been a bunch of legal cases that have come through that's talked about undocumented students. Back in 1975, Texas wanted to do something to prevent undocumented students from getting an education. So what they did is they said, if you can't prove that you belong to the school district, then we're going to charge you a tuition. Even though you've lived there for your whole life. So if you can't prove that you're legally here, we're going to charge you tuition. Well, there was a court case, a Supreme Court case in 1982 where they tested this. And what the Supreme Court said is that by not allowing students a chance to get an education, we're permanently putting them at a disadvantage. And so the Supreme Court said we have to educate all students up to 12th grade regardless of their immigration status. So all students have a right to an education up to 12th grade. They didn't talk about higher education. But in 1986, in California, California before had a law. This was a case that went to the California Supreme Court, where an undocumented student was challenging this. They wanted to go to college. All they wanted to do was go to college. And so with this case, Letitia A. challenged one of the policies of the university district, or the university policies, and they were allowed to come to school, to California colleges for in-state tuition. So she won that case. And so undocumented students could go to the University of California as in-state students because they've been there. All they have to do is be a year, just like any other out-of-state student, to get that in-state tuition waiver. Well, then we had this wonderful guy named Bradford. He was in the registrar's office at one of the UC schools, and he says, "Darn it, I'm not going to do this anymore." And he refused to let undocumented students. If students can prove that they were in the country legally, he wasn't allowing them to have in-state tuition. He wasn't processing their application. And so, of course, like a good university, they took some employment action because he wasn't following the rules. Well, he sued the University of California Regents and won, saying that that he had to get his job back, and then that overrode the Letitia bill. So from then on, students couldn't get in-state tuition. Undocumented students could not get in-state tuition in California. And then in 1986, Congress passed this Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigration Responsibility Act. It's a big, big act like this. It covered everything from mail order brides to Border Patrol. But one of the provisions in that was Provision 505. And if you'd like to read that, basically what this says, this is a provision that talks just about tuition and things. And they're saying that in this provision, we cannot give an undocumented student any special advantage that we're not giving another U.S. citizen. So in other words, we can't give, if we're in an in-state school, we can't give an undocumented student in-state tuition if we're not giving an out-of-state U.S. citizen that same tuition. Okay, so that law went into effect, and so they weren't giving anybody in-state tuition because of this, right? And then back in about 2001, some states tried to figure out a way to get around this. And what they were saying is that if a student, and these 10 states have passed this law, if a student has graduated from a school in that state, so in Washington's case in HB 1079, if you graduate from a high school in that state and you've been living in that state for at least 3 years, then you sign an affidavit that says, yes, I am undocumented, but I will correct my status as soon as I'm able, then we allow the students to come to in-state tuition. So before we get too far on here, why do we charge students who live in the state less than we charge out-of-state students for tuition? Yes?
Because we're paying taxes in the state to support higher education.
Because we're paying taxes, that's right. So people who live in Washington pay taxes, and we're supported, the school is supported in part by your tuition, even more and more, it's coming out of your pocket. But the state also funds part of your education. So out-of-state students have to pay the full cost. Is anybody an out-of-state student here? Yeah, and what's the full cost?
I have 6 credits this quarter, and I have $3,500 for tuition.
Wow. So, yeah, and basically, in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition, we see a huge difference. I think this is a little bit old slide, because I think tuition has gone up quite a bit since then. So we're still looking at a big chunk of difference. And what kind of taxes do we pay in Washington to support our infrastructure? What's the main type of tax that we pay? Sales tax. A lot of states have income tax, but Washington's lucky enough to have a sales tax. So if you're undocumented and you've been living here for several years, have you paid taxes?
Yes.
That's right. So if you're undocumented, you've lived here, you bought things, you're paying taxes. So that's why the legislatures felt that if an individual has been here, they've been contributing to the economy, they've been contributing to the tax base, then they should have the same right to get in-state tuition as students who've been here. For other students, if you're an out-of-state student, and you move to Washington, you've got a year to establish yourself as an in-state resident, right? And then you can start getting in-state resident tuition, okay? There's a whole bunch of rules around that, but basically you have to be here for a year. Undocumented students have to prove that they've been here for 3 years. And they have to have graduated from high school, or they have to have gotten their GED in the state. Okay, so that law, that 505 law, we're not giving undocumented students any special privilege, because an out-of-state student, if they've lived here for 3 years and they've been paying taxes and they graduated from high school, they're going to get in-state tuition too. So we're not sideways with that provision in that provision 505. So here's what it takes to qualify in Washington. So that's the good news. Hey, great, we get financial aid, or we get in-state tuition. But if you have no money, and you have a bill of $10 and you have a bill of $5, but you have no money, does it make a difference? You still have no money. So students can come for in-state tuition, but they have no access to financial aid. So there's no federal aid, there's no state aid. The only access to financial aid they might have are private scholarships. Yeah, pretty much private scholarships, and generosity of other folks around. So they don't have access. And again, think of it. These students are undocumented immigrants, so chances are they're not getting those really good jobs. Their parents aren't getting those really good jobs. And so they're probably some of the students who have most financial need, and they have the least access to financial aid. Here was something else I was going to say about that. So some of the issues that students face, is their immigration status itself. Here they are. They're here. They're in school. They're plugging along. But that's a big issue with them. The education that they have, they're trying to get an education, and family, the issues that they have to face with family. So each one of these will have some subcategories. This is from some of the research I did a few years ago, working with undocumented students and trying to find out what their issues were in these areas. So with immigration status, they're always in the fear, like I said, you don't have any ID issue, you're always in the fear of ICE. I mean, Western is worse is in a peculiar situation, unlike any other school in the country, because we're probably the closest to an international border of any school in the state, and probably any school this side of the Mississippi. We're the closest to the border, so we've got a lot of immigration officers with not a lot to do. So I'm sure you've seen some of the green trucks drive around, kind of just waving. Yeah. Hey there, and show me your ID just to be safe. So they're always in the constant fear of immigration, because we did have a case here a few years ago where a student, one of our students, a Western student with his Western documentation, is sitting at the bus station talking to his mom on the telephone. Unfortunately, he didn't have the foresight. He committed a horrible crime of speaking Spanish in public. He was speaking Spanish in public. Immigration officers heard him, and they started questioning him, just like that. What's your status? Where's your papers? He said, I don't have my papers. I don't carry those with me. Oh, what's your name? Who's your mom? Who's your dad? And at that point, he started worrying. If he starts giving up his mom's name, who's undocumented, if he starts giving up his family's name, they're going to get picked up. So he says, hey, look, come on. I don't have my papers. relax. You know, I'm just a student. I'm just going to school. I'm just waiting to catch a bus to go home. You know, no big deal. Oh, so you lied to me. So you lied to me. So how do I believe you now? Because you lied to me before. So you come with me. He says, 1 minute I'm in the library studying, the next minute I'm handcuffed in the back of a police car. So after about a week in the wonderful, lovely Tacoma Detention Center, he signs a paper saying that, yeah, okay, that's it, and they send him back. So that's bad news. So so he gets sent back, and not just kind of sent back. He's shackled. He's shackled with shackles on his ankles, shackles around his waist, and handcuffs, and they take him to the plane to send him back. And he says, well, it was nice of them. They gave me a sandwich and a bottle of water. He says, I could eat the sandwich, but drinking the water was kind of tough. So he couldn't even drink the water. And he said they're shuffling them all up, and one guy slipped, and of course little dominoes, they all kind of fell down, and they just kept shouting at him and yelling at him to just get on the plane to send him back. They got back to Mexico, they got him to the border and said, see ya. So he walks across the border. He hasn't been there since he's 8 years old. He doesn't even know what the exchange rate is. He doesn't have any money, and he has to kind of find his way back, find his way to get through. So maybe this is one of the issues we'll talk about a little bit later. But the problem was, so that's bad enough, right? But what is he worried about? This is the week before finals. This is dead week, right? How's he going to take his finals when he's in Mexico? So he's struggled enough to get all the money together, right? To come to school, to pay for school, to pay for his tuition, so he's a student. And now he's going to lose it all because he can't take his finals, because he's been deported. And for you to go tell your professor that, hi, professor, I got this one phone call, and I'm not going to make it to class this week. Well, why? Well, because I'm in Mexico. Well, spring break's not till next week. Well, it's not exactly like that. But so you're afraid to tell your professor because you don't know what the sentiment of your professor is, what the sentiment of even your roommate is, right? So you're worried about some of those things. The attitudes, exactly. That's what I was just mentioning, is the attitude. You don't know what your attitude is. A lot of these students, I work with a lot of students from other campuses. There's a funny story at UW. Those two undocumented students who were living together, they were roommates. And they were roommates for, 2 or 3 years, and neither of them knew that the other one was undocumented. They wouldn't, because it's something that's very sensitive, they have to hold very close to them because they don't know what your attitude is. They don't know if you're, for them or against them, or you're going to call immigration. We had another student who, when she broke up with her boyfriend, her boyfriend threatened to call ICE, right? ICE is Immigration Customs Enforcement, right? So he's threatening to call ICE. She's living in the residence halls, worrying about, is ICE going to come and get me? Or is my boyfriend going to come after me? So there's all these attitudes and issues that they have to are faced with their status. So their undocumented status has some limitations too, right? There's certain majors. Anybody here an education major? Is anybody doing their field work, their student teaching? Okay, what do you have to do before you do that? Yeah, and where do those fingerprints go to? The feds, the FBI. So if you're undocumented, you're not even telling your roommate you're undocumented. Do you think you're going to send your fingerprints to the FBI? So your major is limited. You can't major in international studies, right? Because one of the requirements for international studies is to do a semester or a quarter abroad, right? So you can't do that. What about if your professor says, hey, you're in an art history class, Vancouver has this wonderful art museum, right? And we're going to go to see this exhibit. It's part of your class. It's an assignment. Come on, let's go. Well, professor, I can't really go. Well, I can go. I just can't come back. And then that's kind of a requirement for the class. So, but again, you can't tell your professor some of those things. Even some of our sports teams will play up in Canada. And so, if you're on that sports team, do you tell your coach that you can't go and why you can't go? All of a sudden you get sick and you can't make it. So, so can't travel. I mean, now, if anybody's traveled lately, I mean, you're having to show ID all over the place. And international travel, of course, is beyond that. Internships, you're very limited with internships because a lot of the internships are paid, right? And anybody have a student job on campus? You have to do that I-9 thing, and you have to show them some identification. Well, these students don't have that identification. They don't have that Social Security card, so they can't do that. So that internship is limiting for them. We had a student that we were trying to get into be an RA. Passed through everything. We got it all through. She wasn't going to get paid to be an RA. She She just went through the rigmarole, and then we got caught up with HR because of some loophole with the law saying that we can't let somebody volunteer to do a paid job. Yeah, that's a whole other issue. Leadership opportunities, is anybody in student government? Well, in student government, you get paid to be in student government. So can you be an officer in student government if you're undocumented? Technically, yes, but in reality, no, you can't. Because you have to be paid, and you can't volunteer to do a job that somebody else wouldn't get paid for. So lots of limitations. One of the things with education is that whole hope and despair. We're giving them the hope. We cracked the door open and said, hey, great, you got the chance to get an education. How do I pay for it? Okay, I figured out a way to pay for it, so great. Okay, now I'm going to graduate, then what happens? I still don't have my papers. I still don't, have what it takes. And I have to go through all these challenges, all these obstacles just to get through, just to get the education, whether it's with the classes, whether it's with my roommate, whether it's with the homework, all these kind of issues that you're having to face. So there's all this hope and then despair all at the same time. Of course, cost and financial aid. Again, they're not eligible for aid. I mean, there's a lot of scholarships. We're always talking about all these scholarships for students who have need. Again, the way we prove need is through the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. Well, these students can't fill out a FAFSA. So we have to find out creative ways to prove that they're poor. It's not enough that they don't have money. They have to prove that they're poor. And so we have to figure out ways to do that so that they can be eligible for need-based scholarships and need-based grants if those come eligible for it. Because in some states, a couple states, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma, do have need-based grant aid for undocumented students. But again, they have to go through this whole rigmarole to prove that they have need. Washington, we're trying to pass a law. They've introduced a law in the Washington legislature to allow students to get the Washington Need Grant, but that didn't get anywhere the last session. Community climate as well. There was an article in the Western Front a couple years ago talking about international students who are here and the harassment they were getting from cars driving by, screaming, "Hey, go home," and all this thing, and some of the hassle that international students who are here legally because they're international students, and the hassle that they're getting with some of their classmates and some of the other people in the community. So you can imagine if those same people who are hassling international students knew that a student was undocumented, they'd probably get a little bit more hassle. Family issues, safety and security. Again, this is one of the issues because when you're undocumented, you tend to live in a community where you know the surroundings. And you know where it's safe to shop, you know where it's safe to ask for a job, you know where it's safe to go and when to go and that sort of thing. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but when I went to college, it was a pretty frightening experience about going to this whole new environment, this whole new place, and it was kind of exciting, but it was kind of nervous at the same time because you didn't know what to expect. Now imagine with an undocumented student with these fears. Now you're out of that element that is sort of safe because your safety is a lot different than the rest of our safety. And now you come into a place that's completely different. And not only are you risking your safety, you're risking your family's safety. And when the student was picked up and he called me, he was asking, do you think my family's at risk now because they picked me up? Well, they have his cell phone, right? So they have all the information they have. And I said, yes, your family could be at risk. Your family may be in trouble. And so his family had to take some precautions. So the students aren't only risking their safety and security, they're risking their family's safety and security as well. Economic issues, again, these are families struggling to make it at best. And when they're trying to help the student go to college on top of it, there's still all these economic issues about for the family as well. Again, first-generation students, Latino students, a lot of students of color, they don't always get the kind of support that they need from their family for higher education. Either the parents don't know how to support them, the family doesn't know how to, they may say, yes, go to college, do it, but they don't have any idea how to support the student. And a lot of times, especially for some of the Latino women, it's outright like, no, I don't want you to go. I don't want you to move away from home. Why don't you go to the community college for 8 years? So that's what my dad told me. I try to tell him that I'm going away to college, and I'm like, I spent 4 years at the community college. He said, what's wrong with Phoenix College? I'm like, Dad, I've taken all those classes. They want me to teach. I need to go on. But even as a male, Dad didn't want me to leave home to go to college. So they know it's important, but they don't know how to support their students going off to college. So institutions. So those are some of the issues that the students face. They're worried about their security, they're worried about their family, they're worried about their money, they're worried about their majors. So they have all these issues that they're trying to deal with and study, and get involved with school and do all the things that a college student is supposed to do, right? But then as an institution, we have some concerns that we have to worry ourselves about. Enrollment. That's an issue, but I can't remember what it was about. But it's how do we now the law says we can admit students, we can let them in and let them pay in-state tuition. So how do we deal with that as an institution? How do we the admissions office, how do we consider that? How do we know that a student is undocumented? And if they are, how do we document that? Because we want to protect, we want to respect the student's privacy. But again, when I did my research, this was when that other guy from Texas was in that big White House. And Homeland Security, was tapping people's phones, and they're the ones who do immigration and all this kind of thing. So, as an institution, we have to be careful to protect the student's identity and protect the student's rights. So, how do we do that? Those are some of the issues we have to deal with. We have to help the students understand that by identifying themselves as undocumented, they're not putting themselves at risk as much as they may think. They're always at risk. But so how do we do that as an institution? How do we track that? And how do we support the law that the Washington State has passed? Retention, approach to retention. And if students can't pay for school, chances are they're not coming back. And so just the retention issues about majors, and we know again Latinos have one of the highest dropout rates. So what are we doing for these students to help retain them? But when I did a little bit of data collecting a couple years ago, at that point we had about 30 students who were undocumented. Their GPA, as an average, we had of those 30 students, we had one who had dropped out with an average GPA of about a 2.8. So these students are committed. They're dedicated. They get some really, they're really committed to their education, and they're really working hard to stay here and do what it takes. But still, it's taken a lot more effort for them. So they're quality students. This is one of the policies that Western has. Students are expected to abide by the university policies and regulations as well as all applicable federal, state, and local laws. So as an institution, are we required, are we obligated to report these students? They've broken a national law, a federal law. Do we kick them out? So these are some of the things that we have to struggle with. Some of the policies and things that we have to struggle with in doing this. Again, just like with the student who was deported, what do we do for that student? How do we, in his case, what I had to do is make some phone calls to some professors, and without giving him too much information, we got him incompletes in his classes so that he could complete those classes eventually. It's good to know he's going to graduate next quarter. So that's always kind of fun. And we've already had probably a half dozen students who graduated, undocumented students who've already graduated. So they're committed and they're doing it. External affairs, it's what do we do? I mean, as external affairs, when if ICE does want to come to campus, do we have any recourse? Do we have, as an institution, what do we do as an institution? I mean, I don't think we can stop them, but what recourse do we have? Do they have to contact our university police department before they come to campus? Do they, can they go and question students randomly? Can they go to the Ethnic Student Center and start, or the International Student Center and start asking people for ID? What kind of policies and stuff as an institution do we have? And do we have in place to at least work with these students, if not protect these students, right? So we have lots of. So again, why does this matter? And this is something I found very interesting. Here's some comments, and take a little bit to read. These are some of the sentiments that are out there. So any illegal, and this is I took this directly from a website, and this was some comments on an article. Government should immediately hunt them down. Here's another one. Why are we doing anything other than shipping illegals back to their home country? Someone please explain to me why we're supporting illegals when our own citizens are not being helped at the same level. Send them home. Take care of our own. Their parents didn't earn them, again, exactly from the privilege to be equal to American citizens or legal residents. As a legal immigrant and taxpayer, I think this country should drop the born right citizenship, stop feeding these parasites. I don't like the parasites. Did you know that undocumented individuals will contribute, I think it's $5 billion a year to Social Security that they'll never see? So they're parasites to the Social Security system. And that's not to mention the unemployment that they pay and all the other taxes they'll never see. So those parasites. Which will attract more and will spend money on people who really earn it. Okay. So where do you think this was found? I took these off of a website. Yeah. Chronicle of Higher Education. These were educators. These were people from other colleges and universities. People who read and everybody knows what the Chronicle is. You know, it's our weekly kind of Bible of what's going on in education. And the funny thing is, what they're commenting on was just a short little article that asked on a piece of research that asked colleges how do they report undocumented students? Do they report, in the reporting of how many students we have? Do they report it? That's all they were saying. They weren't saying we're for this, we're against it. Just do you report undocumented students, and how do you report that? That's all they were commenting on. But yet these were the kind of comments and the kind of sentiments that were out there from educators, from people out there. So the sentiment, I'm assuming, I know that where my passion lies, and if you guys haven't figured that out. But and we have to respect that. We have to respect the understanding of how some of the other folks feel, because it's a very sensitive issue. It's very, it's very sensitive, very volatile, and it's a lot deeper than the sound bites and things that we talk about. That you'll hear on Fox News, or you'll hear from some of these folks. It's a whole global economy kind of thing that we have to worry about. So, again, what's the use? So why should these students get educated if they're not going to get a job afterwards? They can't get a job afterwards. Why should they? Why should we help them?
Education is the only way out.
Yeah, it's the only way out.
They're part of the global community, even if they're not going to be part of our immediate community.
That's right.
The more we raise everyone up, the more we're all raised.
That's right. Close. Yes. Yeah.
Local economy is global economy and vice versa.
Yep. Well, I always ask a student, when a student asks me that, I always say, is it better to be an educated ditch digger or an uneducated ditch digger? Right? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You've got a U.S. degree, so they deport you, they send you back. You're going back. I mean, if we want to stem the tide of undocumented people in the country, let's give them education, so they can go back home and get jobs and go back to the country where they came from and get the jobs and build the economy with a different respect and a different look at the United States, right? So, I think we should educate everybody. And again, but our education, we're a liberal arts education. We're not training you to be a welder. We're not training you for a particular job. We're training you to be critical thinkers, to be critical readers, to be critical citizens. That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to necessarily train you for a job. We're training you how to think as more critically and read more critically and be more critical and be able to contribute to society as a whole. So what can we do? The DREAM Act is a piece of legislation that's been floating around for several years, and it was actually introduced several years ago by this guy from Utah, Orrin Hatch, of all people, a Republican. He introduced it. He was one of the first sponsors of the DREAM Act. And what the DREAM Act says is we're going to give undocumented students an opportunity to gain their legal status in the country. And there's certain criteria that they have to be. They have to come here, I think, by the age of 15. They have to be in good standing. They have to be good citizens. They'll have to get at least 2 years of education, whether it's a community college or a trade school or a university. And then they have to apply. And once they do that, then they get legal status in the country. So they got 6 years to do these things. And then once they do these things, then they have a legal status to be here. right? And so who are we keeping here? We're keeping the students who are more educated, more committed, who have, who are good citizens, and we're trying to build up that base, because we're already importing lots of other workers from other parts of the country when we have a great supply here, if we allow them a chance to get educated, right? So they're already, we've already invested millions of dollars in these students from kindergarten through 12th grade. We've already invested money in these. So is it a smart economics move to say, oh no, stop, you can't come to college after we've invested all this money in you to get at least your high school diploma? So just economically, it's a pretty good idea. I mean, there's lots that needs to happen. I mean, don't get me wrong. The immigration system is broken. It's shattered. It needs fixing, right? But that's the system. These are individuals. These individuals need some support. We need to help some of the individuals. But at the same time, we need to fix the immigration system, right? We need to fix the world economy. We need to fix, we need to look at the reasons individuals are immigrating to the U.S. and figure out, okay, why are they doing that? Is there something we can do? A lot of times it's economics, right? So if we can develop the economy in some of the countries, their own countries, chances are they're not going to come. Because if you had a choice, and you could stay home in a country where you spoke the language, where your family is, where you live for generations, you know the culture, you know the neighborhoods, you know everything, or go to a country where you know you're going to be discriminated against, where you know you're risking your life just to get there, when you're getting to a place where you know you're going to be persecuted and it's going to be a very frightening place. Which would you rather do? Would you rather stay home if you had a job, or go and take all these risks and risk your life to go someplace else? So if we help them develop, the economies in these other countries, then perhaps the immigration tide would be slower. Unlike some of the other folks who think we should just build a bigger wall. Work can prevent. The state need grant is one of the laws that was introduced last session to allow undocumented students to get the state need grant, to allow those students to get. I mean, the state need grant is only a couple $1,000s at best, right? So it's only just a small fraction of what it's going to cost to go to school. But it's still something. Key campus contacts. If you're a student, if you're a faculty, if you're a staff member, be that person that the students can trust. Be that student that they can come to and be supported. You don't even have to know that they're undocumented. You just have to be that supportive staff member, that supportive roommate, supportive RA that's going to support the students. And something that I saw Bryce over here develop these wonderful little cards. It's a safe zone for undocumented students. Share the dream. And on the back of it, it says, undocumented students are faced with a number of issues and concerns unlike any other student on campus. Their lack of proper documentation can put them at risk at a number of levels. They often need a safe and comfortable place where they can discuss their situation freely without fear. If you can provide such a place, please display this card and declare your space a safe zone so that these students can share their dreams and concerns. So we have some of these, so you can be that person that will help support these students in one way or another, just by being that friendly ear. And if you're like a real rabid anti-immigrant, please don't put these up and wait for people to come in and then call ICE on them. Okay, just please. And we can increase the college knowledge. We increase the knowledge in the high school. Increase the knowledge of students, because a lot of students think, well, I don't have my papers, I can't go to school. Or why should I even try? Because I'm not even going to go to class because it doesn't matter. I'm not going to go to college. It's not going to make any difference. So we need to increase the college knowledge of the community and of the world. We need to review all the policies on campus, how they're impacted, how financial aid is impacted, how the residents' lives is impacted, how hardship withdrawals. Because there's nothing in hardship withdrawals that says you're eligible for a hardship withdrawal if you get deported. There's nothing there. So we need to look at the policies and things that the university has and see where some of those problems are and try to anticipate where some of those problems are and not wait until something happens and then try to backfill it. And provide the safe zone. So that's the safe zone. And if you're interested, our website, Student Outreach Services website has these. You can print these out, or I have a supply here if anybody wants those. You can do that. And here's some other resources, some great resources for on the issues of undocumented students. LEAP is the Latino Education Achievement Project. It's a state organization that actually got 1079 going and introduced and passed into law. National Immigration Law Center, the Dream Listserv, Moldov. These are all some really good research opportunities. They have some great articles and great research on on undocumented students, so if anybody's interested. Our website, Western Washington University Student Outreach Services, we have some pretty good resources there that students, and I will put this PowerPoint on that for you to take a look at if you need it. And that's it. Any questions? Anybody want to go to another country without visa status? Yeah.
I'm going to be getting a certification in K through 12, and my concern is to work with students, to work with their parents, in making sure that they're getting the support they need at home, and being able to, I guess, just communicate with them in a way that they understand that I'm there to help them, and not that they don't have a lot to fear. Educating the parents along with the students.
Yeah.
So, any ideas for that?
What I did in admissions, when this law first got passed, I was working in admissions, and that was the question, like, how do you approach a student? And finally, I would just say, hey, you undocumented? I can help you out. But just be open with it. Just say, I understand these are some issues, or talk about it in the abstract. I understand that for some people who are undocumented, that this is the issue. And I understand that, here's ways that I can support, and here's some resources that you can support. So just be, talk about it in the abstract to them so that they know that you understand the issues and they can feel more free about that. What else? Yes?
Is there any first step one could take to put an undocumented student on the road to documentation?
See, and that's the really difficult part. Because, first of all, you have, for one thing into college, they haven't had a chance up to this point because you have to be 18 to do that. There's no real easy step. You can file some paperwork, which takes forever, but then you're putting yourself at risk at that point too, because there's also this other funny little law that says if you've been in the country for 1 year without proper documentation, you have to go away for 10 years before you can come back.
So it's a catch-22.
So it's a catch-22. Yeah. So it's really difficult. Usually, what usually happens is the parents may have filed for something way back. And if they file with the student's name on there, there's an avenue there, by using the parents' applications from when they first got here, when they first started the process. But there's very little we can do. That's why the DREAM Act is so important. Is that once we do that, then there is going to be some opportunities for students. Yeah.
Are there restrictions for ICE and them coming on campus? Like, if they found out that a particular college was, a safe haven for illegal immigrants, would ICE increase their activity?
Probably. I can only speculate. I got a funny story about that too. But they may, and there's no policy, and that's one of the things that I think that the university needs to look at. What is the policy? Even if it's just a matter of having ICE contact university police saying, hey, we're coming to campus. And then we need to understand what the policy of the UPD is to notify the students and to notify, people like me or other administrators to see, hey, we know ICE is coming in, to do something. But one of the funny story I had is I know somebody who works for Customs and Immigration, and they're trying to do a cultural awareness thing. And so they were inviting people to come and do cultural things. And so they were asking me to come, as for today, to do a presentation on... It was Wednesday, that's right, it's today. And they said, can you do, she was asking me, can you do, because she knew we knew each other from before she was on the other side. And she said, can you do something about, Mexican culture, Hispanic culture? I said, look, I really don't have time, I've got to go, I'm packing up, I'm leaving. And she kept pestering me and pestering me. I said, look, I do have one PowerPoint that I can present to you that might be actually helpful. It's on undocumented students, issues. I could talk about that. She said, oh no, I don't think that would be appropriate. I figured, well, it's so much for education. So, so they weren't too keen on that. But, there is no policy. And that's some of the things we need to look at, and the external affairs really needs to look at. But the problem that I have as an administrator is it's very hard for me to bring this up to my boss and to her boss and to get to, because we're on student affairs and external, this is external affairs issue, and they usually say, that's none of your business, that's external affairs, quiet down. But if students were to bring this up, You know, we have a group on campus now called, help me out, thank you, Students Coalition for Immigrant Rights. And, you know, for a group like that to bring this up and say, what if, what do we do? I think you'll get a lot more traction than I would get. Actually, our student government passed a resolution in support of the DREAM Act. That, you know, it's just a resolution that says we support the DREAM Act. You know, 1,000 organizations across the country support the DREAM Act, so we're not really going out on a limb. Governor Gregoire supports the DREAM Act. Both of our senators support the DREAM Act. So, yeah, that was one of the discussions I had with some administrators. They're like, well, do you think we're taking a risk if we support? Yeah, come on, we're going out on a limb that's like this big. You know, we're not risking much here. Everybody, you know, the college board supports the DREAM Act. You know, everybody supports the DREAM Act. Not everybody, but yeah.
This is related to an earlier question. So, undocumented immigrant makes it to the United States. You're cross-border illegally, they're here. What would be the recommended course of action for them to obtain legal status here? What would you say to somebody? They right away get here. What do they do to put them on the path to becoming a citizen?
Yeah, if they're adults, they can start the application process. They need to contact a lawyer and start that process. They wouldn't be immediately deported. They need to start the process and get that going. You know, it's funny. The whole, again, that's what I'm saying. The immigration system is shattered. It's broken. It's because, okay, we've got ICE, we've got Homeland Security here saying we're going to keep all these immigrants out, right? And then we've got Social Security over here saying, oh, you've got a job? And you don't have a Social Security number? How are you going to pay taxes? Here, take this individual tax identification number and use it so that you can file your taxes. So if ICE was really serious about doing this, they can go to the IRS and say, hey, give us all the folks with I-10s. We want to check them out. That's all they have to do. But they're not serious because in Washington State, we have a $1 billion industry in agriculture. Right? Do you ever see ICE going through Wenatchee during harvest season? No, because the farmers would go up in arms, right? Hey, you're taking away all our labor. So it's this funny kind of thing. You know, it's a funny kind of thing because a lot of times, well, oftentimes you can get picked up, you can get sent to detention, you can go see a judge, and the judge can say, okay, we're gonna release you and give you certain criteria to take care of this. One student I know who's he was in a pickle. His family, his mom she actually had FBI come and see her because somebody was using her identification. If you're going to steal somebody's ID, don't steal somebody's an undocumented person's ID. But she was good and she turned herself in and said, hey, and the immigration officer said, hey, well, you know, we know this isn't you, we know that you haven't been writing these bad checks, but you know, you need to, you know, start the process and you know, because she had started the process way back. And so it's an application that you can submit. It's best to see an immigration lawyer to start that process. But it's an application that you can submit. And they're looking at different things. One of the things that they're looking at is family reunification. So if you've got a partner here, if you've got a father or an uncle here, family reunification is one of the criteria. And there's a whole bunch of other criteria that they're going to look at. So anyway, so she starts. You know, she continued the process because she had started from before because her father was here. And paid the lawyer a bunch of money and took care of that. And then his dad gets picked up. They had a raid on the place that he was working, right? So he gets picked up and sent. You know, and his boss, the place that he worked, knew that he didn't have his papers because he had an I-10, right? They knew that. But part of his perks and his benefits was housing on the orchard, right? So now he comes back and he's lost his job. Right? So he's lost his job, and he's also lost the place that he's going to live. Because that's part of the deal, right? And mom's been picked up. She has 2 jobs. She's lost one of her jobs, right? But they both agreed to get the paperwork going. So they pay this lawyer thousands of dollars, right? Well, the lawyer is a small office of 1, and he dies. So all the money that they invested, all this stuff, is just kind of gone, right? So now they have to start all over because they need to get their files, get another lawyer to kind of look at the files and do all that sort of thing. So there's always these kind of nasty things that happen. So, yeah. Yeah.
I'm just curious, so there's the safe zone that you look at in your office, but is Western on the same page as far as being a safe zone? Like university police, faculty, administrators, all
No, no, we're not. And there's certain cities called sanctuary cities. And sanctuary cities have certain criteria that they agree. One of the things they agree, and the university can look at some policies and see what they would do. But one of the things that sanctuary cities will agree to is that if a cop pulls you over, if you get pulled over by police, they can't ask you about your immigration status. They have to address that broken tail light, that illegal left-hand turn, whatever it is, they have to address that, but they can't look for identification in terms of your legal status, right? Your immigration status. Other places like my fair city, Arizona, where I'm going back to, they take great delight in finding any excuse they can to pull people in. They'll raid the Home Depots because that's where the day laborers are, and they put them out in these tents in the desert. It's a wonderful, wonderful setup. They put them out in the tents in the deserts to until they can get deported and do whatever they need to. Give them pink underwear. It's bologna sandwiches. Sheriff Joe is a wonderful guy. So he does. He takes great delight in doing everything he can to find any excuse to check on status and things. So. Yes.
You said earlier that one of the guys that got sent back, what you're thinking was that if he got educated, he could eventually go back, if he did get sent back again, and help his country. So my question is, as an ESL teacher, would you recommend, or is there some idea about possibly going as an American citizen and teaching English to Mexicans in Mexico to help them to become educated?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, education. When is education really a bad thing? To help educate them, to give them more opportunities, to teach them English, to have those two languages is going to be beneficial to the individual, whether they stay in the home country and get an education and then become bilingual, bicultural. Because companies, you think about, what's the aside from English, what's the next largest language? Who has more? I mean, you've got China, but you look at all of South America and Central America, except for Brazil, is all Spanish speaking. That's a huge economic market. So if you have individuals who are bicultural and bilingual, a company is in great stead to hire somebody like that because they can. One of the things I talk to students about, especially the business majors, is to look for jobs with those international companies. Go to Starbucks, go to Costco, go to these places that have offices in different countries, because maybe they can get you a job back in their home country, and you can eventually make your way back because now you're sponsored by a company, right? So that's another way to get back in. But look for those multinationals. One of the questions that I often get asked, it's a matter of semantics, is the difference between an illegal immigrant and an undocumented immigrant, right? If you're speeding, are you an illegal driver or are you doing something illegally? Yeah, as a driver, you're not illegal. So a person cannot be illegal. They can do things that are illegal, but the person themselves, a person cannot be illegal, right? So you hear the semantic, you don't think much about it. Yeah, it's an illegal immigrant or it's an undocumented immigrant or unauthorized immigrant. It sounds like it's a semantic thing, but it's not. It's really you're not saying that person is illegal. That person has done something illegal, but that person is not. A person cannot be illegal. So, yeah.
I didn't quite hear this lady's question down here, but I heard the two words safe zone, and then you said no.
Yeah.
I heard from a teacher that grade schools are safe zones, like that ICE can't come on campus, can't access the records. I don't know what she asked, but can colleges, or at least a college, become safe zones where ICE cannot come on campus and cannot access?
Yeah. The thing with the elementary schools is that they can't come in and get a minor, and they can't nab a minor without the parents' permission, right? Well, mine was high school back in Phoenix. I love the principal there. They had ICE chasing after a couple of kids that they thought were illegal and undocumented. They come to campus. He closes the gates and refuses to let ICE in, and it was on the news and everything. He says, "No, look, if they were in the car with their parents and their parents were speeding, do they get the ticket? So the parents brought them here as kids. They didn't have any choice in coming. No, Mom, I'm not going to America. It's wrong. So it's not going to happen. But yeah, we can declare ourselves a safe zone, and we can declare these things, right? what happens, how that plays out is a different story. Again, ICE are the people who tap your phones. You know, ICE, Homeland Security are the ones, so they kind of operate in a different way. But if we establish ourselves and say, this is what it means for Western to be a safe zone, it means that we're not going to allow you to have access to our student records. We're not going to allow you to come on campus without notification. We're not going to allow you, so you can say these things. And then how does that play out, right? That's a different story. So, I mean, some of the things that we can say is that we're not going to give, as a university can pass a policy or do a policy that says, we will not give student records without a subpoena. You know, simple enough, because they can come in and say, we're the government, we need, you know, we're the ones who wrote for so give us your records. You know, they can say, you know, we need a subpoena. You know, because the school can give the government, you know, these records. The same thing happened with the phone companies, right? The phone companies let the government in because they said we're from the government. So the university can pass a policy and say as simple, and because they can't refuse a subpoena, right? So they can say, you know, we're not going to give records without a subpoena. We're not going to let you take a student off campus without a subpoena, without a warrant. So we can say those kind of things and see how that goes. I mean, it'll be a challenge, but you know, we have to draw the line in the sand someplace. Yeah.
What are other campuses doing now? Are they creating the same zones? Are they offering aid to more undocumented students? Because like I'm just based off like if you go to like the east side of Washington, there's going to be a larger percentage there, I would assume, of undocumented students. So is more aid going to be available to like students from Wazoo and Central, or like are we offering a lot of aid also? Or
The thing with all that is, there's two things. You have to be creative, and you don't want to make a big deal about it. You know, because if you make a big deal out of it, you got people like Bradford who are going to come by and say this is wrong, and you know, stop it. So, I mean, my philosophy has always been, you know, I'm not going to, you know, go out with a brass band. You know, I'm going to do these things, and if somebody questions it, then they'll question it, and then we'll address it then. But yeah, some of the other schools are doing some things. I know Wazoo has come up with, or I'm sorry, Washington State. They don't like Wazoo. Washington State has come up with a scholarship for students who come from agricultural backgrounds. We have a scholarship for students who aren't eligible for, like, for example, AS used to have a scholarship for students who were ineligible for federal aid because they had been arrested for, or they've got a warrant for drug use, right? So there are some things that we can do, you know, to offer scholarships and offer things that don't require Social Security numbers, that don't require permanent residency status. But there are some, you know, and you have to be creative and you have to be kind of quiet about it because you don't want to kick up a big fuss.
Can you share current opportunities to give? Like, are there scholarships that currently we could contribute to help the students at Western?
Yeah, we have a scholarship in SOS for students that, when I got my dissertation, it was set up in my parents' honor, but for undocumented students. I mean, we say it's for students who are ineligible for federal aid, but that's eligible. That's there for students. We have the Pan-African Minority Assistance Program scholarship that people can contribute to, that we don't require permanent residence or Social Security numbers for that. So, yeah.
What do most undocumented students do after receiving their college education, bachelor's?
Two of them that I know have gone on to grad school. Others will work. One of the creative things that students will do, or individuals will do, is start their own business. Right? Because you can start a business, you can get a tax number, and you can pay yourself then. But your business, you have to hire yourself. And so a lot of them will, well, not a lot, but some can create their own businesses and start their own businesses to do that. But a lot of them, they go back to working the kind of jobs they had before, but they're doing it with a degree. So, because most students are working. Most of them, before they come here, or when they go home in the summers, will work. They'll have jobs. Not very good ones, but they're getting paid. So, yeah. What else?
May I?
Sure.
There's several people here tonight that are admirers of Dr. Nerini and the work that he's done. And I want to also open up the floor to anyone who'd like to make a comment.
Silence. Yes.
I had the privilege of interviewing you last summer for a paper. I work on campus homelessness too, as you know, and I just appreciate it and being here tonight.